Hi, Bougie Duchess here. And as I mentioned earlier this morning, I was going to start talking a little bit about my recovery today. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about step one. And step one in most 12-step programs are basically it's a first step and where you admit some type of defeat and you're in a program and you're about to let go of the things that have been creating some type of havoc in your life. For many alcoholics and drug addicts, of course, it's an addiction they're letting go of. For many people that have an eating disorder, it's a food situation that they're letting go of. For people that shop beyond their means, it's of course the credit cards and not living within their means. But for somebody like myself who's been in the program, next month will be my 10th year. It, we're dealing with years of denial and not wanting to look at my stuff. So when I did step one this time around, of course, I'm looking at doing it about people, places, and things, and realizing where the problem is existing within me. So step one is we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, but for me, or drugs, but for me, it was about I was admitting that I was powerless over people, places, things, and emotions and food and on a deeper level, and that my life is still a little bit unmanageable. And so that's what my writing is about today. And so I'm going to read a little bit about what I wrote. So I wrote about unmanageability, and unmanageability certainly has changed for me in the 9+ years of my recovery. Early on, it just represented the fact that I was detoxing from alcohol and drugs, but I failed to realize that I had transferred my addiction over to caffeine and nicotine, or at least so I thought initially. My nerves were bad. I had been keeping myself busy. You see, there is this wounded child that I had harbored deep inside that I kept guarded and protected. I had in the past been asked to look at this situation early on in my recovery, but I was not ready to take such a journey. It represented the loss of innocence, and I am far from that place, you see. There had been so much that had happened in my life. I possibly could never have a nurturing moment to allow that wounded child to heal, let alone appear. It would represent the letting down of my guard and allow myself to become vulnerable. That is inconceivable. Where and how would I begin? This simply is not the peeling of an onion. This would be the ripping open of old wounds, the kind of wounds that I had hurt people over, burned bridges. This would be unmanageability that I had never known or felt before. It would give rise to old fears that had disappeared with the assistance of narcotics. I'm trying to scroll down here as I'm looking at my readings. Um, that it would give rise to old fears that had disappeared with the assistance of narcotics at first, and then much later in my recovery, I would stuff it with food. Ah, food. Now there is a guilty pleasure that just talks to me in the worst way, or quite possibly better than any man I have ever met, for the pure satisfaction that it delivers. This particular unmanageability created a delay in my gender affirming surgery that forced me to deal with alone. Not completely alone, but not publicly like I had done with drugs and alcohol. You see, the likelihood of me drinking or using for the reason of pure effect has been lifted, and that's been the gift of the program. That's the smart feat, of course. I have the benefit of understanding the reason. I just don't see the need or reason for me to engage in my addiction. Or at least I believe that I don't. But if I'm completely honest to my innermost self, I realize that I find a good substitution with food. I become self righteous about it because the human need to eat and drink to survive. So, this is where the considerable amount of unmanageability exists for me. I also engage in quite a bit of broken people rescue work. It is the best distraction from having to look at self. I am good at it. In the moment, people tell me that I'm being of service. I learned early on that I had an esteemed dysfunctionality. In order to correct that, I proceeded to do esteemable acts. That too can be quite addicting and lending to the cart of unmanageability. So there are a few situations in my life that lends to unmanageability that falls under the title of character defect. But for the sake of thoroughness, okay, lost my place. But for the sake of, let's see, engage in dysfunction, okay. But for the sake of thoroughness, I will bring them up now for discussion. I have gone to great lengths to avoid it publicly, but secretly I make sure that she is okay. I'll leave that name blank. I can't fix her, but boy, if I could, that control issue would rear its ugly head up multiple times. The love of inanimate objects, psychologically in nature. This constant desire to isolate. If it were not for my commitment and work, I would rarely leave the house. There is also what I refer to as a Captain Save-A-Ho syndrome that I repeatedly find myself involved in as early as my trip to Valley Presbyterian Hospital with Eddie concerning a 12-step issue. I got loud in the hospital and stormed off, turning serious matters into a joke so that it is easier to laugh at them than to sit with the gravity of the tragedy that weighs on myself. There is also the way I treat myself personally, privately, and quietly with a demanding and awkward nature. I push, expecting to respond with the kind of desperation that we hear talk about in the rooms, similar to what we read in the literature. I set aside I set that wait, where am I? Desperation that we hear talk about in the room, similar to what we read in the literature. I set that expectation. I know what is said about expectation, and when I fall short, I use that expectation for an emotional beating that I put myself through. It is condemnatory, condescending, hurtful towards self. I can only attribute this kind of behavior to my ego and an addiction coupled in a united front in an attempt to shred my recovery. Also, without a doubt, there is a boatload of mental health issues that are continuously springing leaks in the bow, and the passenger is trying to stay afloat. So that is just a little bit of insight into what I believe is some of the unmanageability that keeps continuously showing up in my life. And so one of the things that I do to deal with this unmanageability and put it to rest is first thing in the morning, I ask my higher power to help me with these issues, and they are issues, and they are extreme issues at times. And right at the moment, I'm dealing with a lot of isolation that I'm doing. I'm here all alone, except for Bo, and Bo just sleeps most of the time. Um, but I drag him out for the WALK. I can't say the word because then he wants to get up and go. And I sit around here and I do these little YouTube videos. So please subscribe and like them, and please leave a comment. Ask for some type of suggestion as to what you might want to see. Maybe a hairdo video or something. Up, and there's the phone. Gotta go. Until next time. And there's Bo. All righty. Talk to you later. Bye.